Jack Reacher is a ghost.
Can you at least tell me who he is?
Well, I can tell you who he was. Blood military. His first trip to the United States was to attend West Point. 4 years later, he ships out for good. Served with distinction. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, and a Purple Heart. He spent the bulk of his service in the military police. By all accounts, a brilliant investigator. Apparently a troublemaker, too.
Welcome to Now Playing Podcast's Jack Reacher Movie Retrospective Series.
Who the hell are you?
The guy you didn't count on.
Hosted by Brock.
A man this rare can always be of use.
Jason.
I'm in your blind spot, and I have nothing better to do.
And Arnie.
Now we know who's who. Let's get this done.
But be warned, this episode will contain detailed plot spoilers and mildly objectionable language.
It's your last chance to walk away.
We hope you enjoy the show.
Is that fear I hear in your voice, Jack? What you hear is excitement.
Today we're talking about Jack Reacher, starring Tom Cruise, Rosamund Pike, Richard Jenkins, Werner Herzog, David Oyelowo, Jai Courtney, and Robert Duvall. Directed by Christopher McQuarrie. This is Brock, co-host of Now Playing.
I'm Jason.
You think I'm a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm a podcaster with nothing to lose. This is Arnie. So welcome, listeners, to the Jack Reacher retrospective series. Yes, I know we were supposed to be covering Mission Impossible 8 this week. While Stewart is getting better, we're happy to report that. Unfortunately, he still is in the hospital. He's no longer in the ICU, but he's in that intermediate care. He's not in a regular room yet. You can follow us on social media for the up-to-date news on him. Reddit, Facebook, X, Patreon, wherever. We're keeping people informed as to the latest of his status, but we're still not going to do any of the shows he was going to be on without him. So I was thinking, what could we do instead of Mission Impossible that hopefully you listeners would be interested in? With Mission Impossible 8 being such a big film, I was thinking something Tom Cruise. We did all of his 80s films. And then I thought, well, he really only has 3 movies he's made sequels to. Top Gun, covered those. Mission Impossible, we're waiting for Stewart, and then Jack Reacher, which was Cruise's first team up with director Chris McQuarrie. Chris McQuarrie wrote Valkyrie, which Cruise did, but McQuarrie directed Jack Reacher and started a partnership that would continue on for a lot of films, including this weekend's Mission Impossible film.
I don't think Tom Cruise has worked with one director as much as he's worked with Christopher McQuarrie. Christopher McQuarrie, I believe, and you guys spoke about this on the podcast series, that he was the first returning director to the Mission Impossible series. So it was a partnership that continues to bear great fruit for both of them, and they seem to be in the right headspace, and good to know it started here.
Yeah, this really is the beginning of what I would say a beautiful friendship in Hollywood, a very lucrative friendship, starting with this film and then moving on to the Mission Impossible movies. And you're right, Brock, Cruise has not worked repeatedly with directors. He did a couple with Spielberg, and he's worked with some of the best directors. We've talked about it, Oliver Stone and Martin Scorsese. This one, how much did you guys know about McQuarrie coming into it? I mean, we've all seen Usual Suspects. Way of the Gun, are you guys fans?
That's the only McQuarrie movie I haven't seen yet. I did not have time to watch it before this recording because, well, frankly, I have literally seen all of Tom Cruise's movies. I did the filmography project. I finished it quite a few years ago, and I just upkeep it. He was one of the first people I watched all of the films for, and to be honest with you, I only had like 6, because I happened to watch Tom Cruise movies. And since he's worked with Tom Cruise almost exclusively, I've seen all his movies by mistake. Kind of like David Yates, where if you watch all the Harry Potter movies, you pretty much have seen everything he's done.
And I knew Christopher McQuarrie very well from Usual Suspects. I think I mentioned when we reviewed that movie, that was like the first commentary I ever listened to, which had Christopher McQuarrie and Bryan Singer both on it. And I kind of thought those two from that commentary were going to be like a power duo of McQuarrie always writing the stuff that Singer always directs, and it didn't go that way. And honestly, McQuarrie completely fell off my radar. You mentioned The Way of the Gun. That was his directorial debut in 2000, his follow-up to The Usual Suspects. He was still strutting large and had that cachet. And from everything I understand, that movie put him in cinema jail and the directing gulag. He was just not going to be allowed to do that again. And so it wasn't until he re-teamed with Bryan Singer on Valkyrie 8 years later that McQuarrie would get his next writing credit after The Way of the Gun. So, Brock, you haven't seen Way of the Gun. I haven't seen Way of the Gun. Jason, did you see Way of the Gun? Is it as bad as it seems?
I'm not going to say it's as bad as it seems. I'll say a couple of things about it. When I left the theater, it left a bad taste in my mouth. It's a very nihilistic film. I'm not sure that it was released at the right time. 2000 was not the year for a movie like Way of the Gun, which is a very dark crime movie. A lot of good violence, but a really good cast. And I think, I haven't checked on its reputation lately, but it feels like the kind of movie that would become a crime cult classic in the way that Tarantino always talks about those movies that he watched in the 70s, those exploitation movies that he grew up with and really shaped his, style and vision. I think that Way of the Gun could be for today or tomorrow's film students that kind of movie.
I always think of it as the Suicide Kings, remember the Boondock Saints, those kinds of movies. You know what I mean?
That's a good category to throw it in there. Yeah, Brock, I would agree with that.
Yeah, its IMDb user review score sitting around 6.6, so, it's not hated, but it didn't make any money, and yeah, that kept him on the sidelines until, he would work with Tom Cruise as a writer with Valkyrie, and that relationship would make him pretty much Tom Cruise's script guy. Yes, this is going to be his first time directing Tom Cruise with Jack Reacher, and he did all the Mission Impossible stuff, but he wrote Edge of Tomorrow, he wrote The Mummy. I don't know that that's a feather in the cap, but he did it.
Well, there's probably a few writers on that film.
And he wrote Top Gun Maverick. So this is like a power couple. I think Tom gets along better with McQuarrie, better than he ever did with any of his wives.
You're absolutely right, Arnie. This is a great marriage, and it's a good marriage for Cruise, who at this point in his career really needed an action hit. The Mission Impossible movie, Ghost Protocol, had come back the year before, and I'm sure that he was already deep into working on Jack Reacher when that became a blockbuster. So I'm coming into this as the Cruise superfan. All right, I'm going to be the Cruise superfan on this show and the next one. I've loved the man's career. I haven't seen everything, I'll admit. You know what? In this century, I haven't seen Valkyrie. And I didn't see Last Samurai, which is directed by Edward Zick, who we'll talk about in the next movie. But he's my favorite movie star. And I think for 40 years, he's consistently delivered for this industry. And I do appreciate the fact that he's an advocate for the theatrical experience. And I do believe he's a great actor. Magnolia, he should have won an Academy Award for that. Every scene in Tropic Thunder, he absolutely killed.
He should have won an Academy Award for that. I didn't even realize it was him under that makeup. And you can give a supporting actor award to a comedic performance. You can never give them the lead actor role. But every so often, you can get a comedic person in a supporting actor role.
That is true. And Robert Downey Jr. did get the nomination supporting for that movie. Mm-hmm. And if you had to pick one of them.
Jack Palance got an Oscar that one year for City Slickers.
Kevin Kline got an Oscar for that, for Fish Called Wanda. Yeah, it happens every so often, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, when I say that Cruise is a great actor, it's because I believe him in his roles. And we're going to talk a lot about this Jack Reacher character. I think that Cruise embodies this character, even though he doesn't look anything like this Reacher in the books. I'll tell you, Cruise doesn't have the height or the build, but I believe we'll see in this film that there is an intimidation factor that he brings to this role that more than makes up for it.
I disagree with what you just said, but we can talk about that later on. I also think that Tom Cruise has been a staple, like you said, in so many fun movies and so many good movies. And we've seen him try to stretch himself to various degrees of success over the years. Again, I've watched literally every movie he's ever been in because I enjoy his films so much. However, I do acknowledge sometimes he's not right for the roles he selects. When you're in Rain Man or you're in Top Gun or you're in even Eyes Wide Shut, if you get paired up with good directors, right? And if you get paired up in good roles that suit your movie persona, yeah, you're going to soar. And he has found an incredible track record of finding the right projects with the right directors, and good for him for working with and seeking out so many notable directors from the past 40 years. He has worked with practically every big name, and that's not a mistake. He has purposefully sought out those challenges and those experiences.
And I have seen all of Tom Cruise's movies except for 5. When we were coming to this, I did the math, and yeah, he's been in like 40 some films. I'm only missing 5. So when I was younger, Brock, I did what you do with the actor thing. I did it for John Candy and Eddie Murphy and the Corys, you know, high caliber actors to pick their entire filmographies for. But I don't do that as an adult. I do more directors and things. But if I'm only 5 away on Tom Cruise, I got to just knock that out this year. But it's not that I necessarily like him as an actor so much as I think he picks projects that I'm often just drawn to no matter who would be in it. He just has a good way of picking these roles. And I do think, though, when we start looking at the time that Jack Reacher came out, you mentioned already, Brock, that Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol came out in the year before Jack Reacher. Big success for him. But that was like the first big success for him in a long time. I think that you have to go back almost to Minority Report to find a film that wasn't tainted by him in some way. I know War of the Worlds made a lot of money, but that's when he jumped on the couch and left his wife and did all the crazy stuff. Then I look at the films around this time. The Last Samurai is one of the 5 I haven't seen. Never heard anything good about it.
That was actually one I had to go back and seek. Like one of the 5 or 6 that I had left over, that was that one, as well as Valkyrie, which came around this time too.
And then Collateral, I feel like during this period of Cruise's life, including what we're going to talk about with Jack Reacher, he became kind of a generic character. When I look at Collateral and I look at Night and Day and I look at Jack Reacher, it feels to me like he's just being Tom Cruise in these movies and being a action-y guy, but not really pulling out a great performance, which I would say he did in Rain Man, Born on the 4th of July, Risky Business even. You know, I think he has stretched as an actor in the past. I felt like he was on cruise control. Oh my God, that's a bad pun I did not mean to make. But
like it hasn't been done a million times the last 40 years.
Yeah, right. I'm going to go back in there for a second. You said he's just being Tom Cruise. I think what I always say, actors never, like, Samuel Jackson doesn't do Samuel Jackson. I have no idea what Samuel Jackson is in real life, but he has that persona that he goes to a lot in his movies. There's this quality that he always brings to the roles. So Tom Cruise has this movie character guy that he does variations of in a lot of his movies. So I will agree with that assessment of his time around here. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. But don't forget, though, he also did Rock of Ages around this time, right? That didn't hit for me. Oh, God. I just rewatched Collateral, and Jamie Foxx practically steals the film from Tom Cruise. But, you know, the end of that movie is, you know, maybe one day we'll talk about it. But Tom Cruise in that movie was trying to go for something different, but he was playing it a lot of the same Cruisian notes, but he was trying to go to be a villain right there. So, like, he doesn't usually play those kind of guys. He usually plays the heroes, not the villains. And that was he was trying to do there. Like, he did Interview with the Vampire, more early Cruise there, but still, he was not well received as a villainous character, right? So, going into this kind of movie, this is an anti-hero. And I don't think Tom Cruise has played a lot of anti-heroes in his career. He plays the hero. He's tried to play the villain, but I don't think he plays any heroes.
Well, you want to talk villain, you and I need to get on that Collateral podcast together, because I totally bought Cruise in that movie, and I love Collateral. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Good.
There's one around this time. It's not Night and Day. Night and Day is Cruise persona, just him being Tom Cruise, and that picture didn't work at all. It's totally insane. Lions for Lambs. He did a supporting role in this Robert Redford movie. It's kind of a political thriller. I thought he was fantastic as this kind of slimy, bad guy politician guy. I don't think he leaves his office in the film. He's being interviewed, but I thought he was phenomenal. Because he can do this kind of slick, you know that I'm shady, but I'm trying to charm you, but it's a creepy kind of charm thing. Cruise can really do that and turn that on, and he does in that film.
So I felt that movie was an attempt to get back in people's good graces, right? Because he had the whole falling out with America with the couch thing, and then Mission Impossible 3, although I love that movie, it didn't do as big.
It's still the lowest grossing, yeah.
Right, but I felt this was like a calculated move to have him in a Robert Redford movie. He took third billing in that one. And for me, I thought he did exactly what he always does, but didn't bring anything different to it. I felt that part could have been really, like, if Michael J. Fox was able to do that role, it would have been phenomenal based on, because he could do, I'm not saying he's going to do Alex P. Keaton, but he can do a variation or at least bring some life to it. So, Jason, I disagree. I don't think Cruise gave his best foot forward there. He wasn't bad by any means, but when you're acting against Robert Redford, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to stick out. I mean, Brad Pitt did a serviceable job himself in Spy Game against Redford, but I think Tom Cruise, he did Tom Cruise stuff, but I wouldn't put that out there as like a performance you got to see of Tom Cruise that you might have missed. I disagree with that.
Okay. All right. And, I'd love to keep talking about that someday too, because I'd love to talk more Lions and Lambs. But you said a word earlier in that, Brock, calculated. Mm-hmm. And that to me is exactly the way Cruise has taken his career. He's extremely careful about the projects he chooses. He is always in control of the projects that he chooses. And from my research, it was Cruise and his production team that found this Lee Child novel and started the whole journey to getting Jack Reacher to the screen.
Yeah, that's what I had read. I did listen to the commentaries, plural, for Jack Reacher and looked into the making of this. And when this movie came out, I didn't even know Jack Reacher was a book series. I had never heard of Jack Reacher until the movie came out, but it's kind of one of those titles that had been in development hell since the late 90s, but Cruise got the rights in 2005, and then it took 7 years from then to even get this going. Were either of you aware of Jack Reacher before Tom Cruise?
I was not, and he's a fairly recent book hero. Brock, you know him.
Not personally, yes, but I have read about 9 of the books, actually and when I say read, I have listened to 9 of the books. This is a series that I turn on when I'm doing yard work. When I'm not listening to now playing, I will turn the audiobook on and I would do puzzles, or if I'm driving a long distance, I put audiobooks on and painting. Those kinds of things, Jack Reacher books are perfect for that. I just really enjoy having an activity and listening to him because you get really engrossed in the characters, and the guy who reads them is great. I am very familiar with the books. And by coincidence, I had read 8 of them until this one, and this one's the 9th book in the series, so it was perfect timing. I did read the book before to prepare for this podcast.
But had you read any of the books before there was a movie, or did you pick up the books after the movie?
I picked up the book after the second Jack Reacher one because I was intrigued by the character enough to want to read more about the character. So no, I have no real knowledge of the character the first time I saw the movie.
So all of us are coming into this the first time we saw Jack Reacher, because I guess we've all seen this movie before, we're saying. Mm-hmm. None of us had a preconceived notion of what Jack Reacher should be, what Jack Reacher should look like, how Jack Reacher should act, until we saw what Tom Cruise did. Because I do remember there was some backlash against his casting that I didn't pay a lot of attention to, because I still felt there was just a lot of Tom Cruise backlash anyway. But apparently people familiar with the books were very upset because Jack Reacher's supposed to be very tall, I think 6'5", and Tom Cruise is notoriously short. He's listed at 5'9", but it's long been rumored that's an exaggeration with lifts in the shoe, and that Jack Reacher's supposed to be big and burly and muscular. And from what I read, Dwayne Johnson himself is spreading the rumor he was up for the role of Jack Reacher, and people go, that's more what a Jack Reacher should be.
Dwayne Johnson fits the physicality. I think they found the right actor for him in this Alan Ritchson, and maybe we could talk about that a little bit later when we wrap it up, talk about the Amazon series of Jack Reacher.
So when did you guys see this first? I'd been interested in the film after the sequel came out, and so it was during COVID. It was honestly, I think, during our Tom Cruise retrospective series in 2020, when we were leading up to Top Gun Maverick, and that movie didn't come out, but I'd seen so much Tom Cruise, I was like, let me check out this Jack Reacher. I was actually in quarantine for a couple of weeks, and I just was downing movies like you wouldn't believe, just marathoning them while I was stuck in a bedroom alone with nobody coming near me. And so that's when I first saw Jack Reacher, 8 years after it was out, 4 years after the sequel.
I saw it the year after it was released, so either we rented it or saw it on streaming. It was back in 2013. So however we were watching movies back then, we watched it then, my wife and I had only seen it the one time. I actually wrote a review of it on Letterboxd, and I have to say, I agree with myself. It's kind of nice. I didn't realize I wrote the review until after I watched the movie again. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. At least I'm consistent. But it's the only time I watched this movie was in 2013, before today.
And I saw it in the theater. I saw it opening weekend, probably the Saturday after it dropped. And I didn't know anything about the Reacher character, but it was Cruise. And like I said, I was going to be there for it. I was aware of all the backlash, that he didn't look like the Reacher character. And we've been through this before with Interview with a Vampire. We're all old enough to remember that whole bit of business.
Yeah, and Anne Rice did the same thing that Lee Child did, that they walked back their comments about Tom Cruise's performance, although in this situation, it's the other direction. But anyway, look, as a fan of books, characters are written in a certain way, and you're used to picturing them in your head. I remember the first time it happened to me was that movie Sahara with Matthew McConaughey and Steve Zahn. And I had read, I don't know, maybe 10 Dirk Pitt novels up to that point. And neither one of those people look like the characters in the book. And the movie did not really capture the magic of Dirk Pitt on screen. And I was extremely disappointed. And so in this situation, luckily the first time I saw this movie, I did not have to worry about that comparison, but I understand where people are coming from. When you are invested in a character for all of those years, you want to make sure that then when they're on screen finally, they're represented in a way that you can live with, if not agree with.
So since you did read the book now for this review, what are your thoughts on the book before we get into the movie?
The book is really great. It's really well paced. It has a really interesting plot. I will say right now, the book and the movie are very similar. They took the plot from the book and adapted it very well for the screen. I'm not going to go into it like play by play, but when it's appropriate, I will mention during today's podcast, what they did, here or there. But overall, they condensed the book brilliantly for the movie here. Like they really were able to keep the crux of the book and just meld people together. The book itself, it meanders a little bit here and there, but the pace moves because the plot is so interesting. The villains are so interesting. The concept is so interesting. The big difference here, of course, is the movie tells you up front that the sniper was framed. In the book, that unfolds in the first 150, 200 pages.
Oh,
that's very different.
Yes, so it's very different in that sense because there's no mystery here, but in the book itself, you don't know until, 200, 300 pages, like maybe 200 pages in or something like that. Again, I listened to it, so it's like chapter whatever. It was the same thing, though. Like, all this evidence shows he did it, but in this situation, in the movie, which we'll talk about, you knew up front.
Well, I'm looking forward to maybe having you explain a few things to me about this overarching plot that I don't think I got after 2 watchings. And even when watching it for this review, I found myself using that 15 seconds back many times to be like, what did they just say this person had relation to that person related to who? I did rewind and replay quite a bit of this movie to make sure that I could try to get all of the connective tissue, and I can't say I got it. I will say, coming to this review, I remember having positive feelings about Jack Reacher from 2020, but I couldn't have told you a thing about it. I didn't remember any plot points. I didn't remember any action scenes. I didn't remember Rosamund Pike was in it. I remembered nothing. So this was almost like a first watch again for me.
Yeah, I was hoping that no one has to go back 15 seconds as you do the plot summary for us. Maybe you can tell us what you think the movie's about. And then if we have to go back and listen to it over and over again to figure it out, we will.
A sniper kills 5 people in Pittsburgh. We see it's Charlie, but the evidence leads Police Detective Emerson to arrest former Army sniper James Barr. Barr writes just one thing: get Jack Reacher. But he didn't need to write that. Reacher, played by Tom Cruise, sees Barr on the news and heads straight to Pittsburgh. By the time he arrives, Barr's in a coma, having been beaten up in jail. Reacher meets Barr's defense attorney Helen, played by Rosamund Pike, who happens to be the DA's daughter. But Jack isn't there to help Barr, he actually wants to make sure Barr pays. Years ago in Baghdad, Barr snapped and killed some contractors. The army covered it up because the victims were rapists, but Reacher warned Barr, "Do it again and I'll come for you." Helen convinces Jack to dig into the case, and Jack asks her to look into the victims while he checks out Barr. But something feels off. The shooting was too clean, and the vantage point isn't one a trained military sniper would use. The more Jack digs, the more he starts to doubt Barr pulled the trigger. Soon, Jack's being tailed. He takes out some goons in a bar brawl, and when one of them turns up dead, Jack's framed for the murder. He goes on the run and ends up at a shooting range in Ohio where he meets Martin Cash, played by Robert Duvall, who helps Jack figure out the real shooter is Charlie. It turns out the killings weren't random. Here's where it gets convoluted for me. One of the 5 victims, someone named Archer, owned a contracting business left to her by her dead husband, and she was the real target, and the other 4 people were killed just to make it seem random. And why they want her dead, we're going to have to get into. I'm not going to try to touch on this plot summary. But the man behind it all is a former Soviet prisoner turned corrupt businessman called Zek Chelevik, played by Werner Herzog, who uses Charlie to eliminate people who get in his way. Zek has the cops in his pocket. Detective Emerson is working for him and kidnaps Helen to draw Jack out, but Jack teams up with Cash, takes out Zek's goons, kills Emerson, and finishes Charlie in hand-to-hand combat. Zek smugly claims there's no evidence to convict him, and that U.S. prison is nothing compared to the Gulag, so to ensure the Russian is punished and Helen is safe, Jack shoots Zek in the head. Barr wakes up from his coma and looks to be off the hook, and Reacher hits the road as credits roll.
And as the credits unfold in this one, we notice this is the first big change from the book. Brock, the book takes place in Indianapolis, right?
The book takes place in Indianapolis, correct? The shooting range that Arnie mentioned later on in the book in Ohio, it's in Kentucky, but they use Pittsburgh instead. Maybe they got good tax write-offs or something. I have no idea. It's also not in front of a sports stadium. This is in PNC Park where sporting events there, but it's in front of a DMV or something. So like it really does seem random. That's a big difference. And again, I mentioned earlier, the beginning of the book is the sniper shooting the people, but you have no idea it isn't James Barr. But the movie here completely, I mean, if you couldn't figure it out, you know, you see the guy's face, but they don't show you James Barr's face at all until the last minute, right? So you can clearly see it's different. But again, most of the plot points here are the same as in the book. So there's really not much, you know, the differences are understandable in the adaptation.
I do happen to love the Pittsburgh setting. I do want to say that. I think they do a fantastic job location shooting in this movie. It really kind of brings the world to life. It feels like a lived-in city, and so much better than if they'd done this on sets or if they'd done this on real recognizable landmarks all the time.
Yeah, and they really did film in Pittsburgh. They did a lot of on-location, behind-the-scenes stuff. And at the end of the commentary, Tom Cruise gives a shout out to Pittsburgh and thanks them for their hospitality and all that. And it is visually a really interesting city. And I'll say off the bat, I've never seen The Way of the Gun. Maybe I should, because I think right up top, visually and audio, Christopher McQuarrie is bringing his A game. This overall is a film that looks great a lot of the time. There's a couple magnificent shots I'll call out, but just these openings with the cityscapes, the helicopter shots. I do believe this was before drone footage was good enough to use in a film. So they got a chopper, filmed the city, and the close-up work of the bullets and the making of the bullets, the way this is done in montage where you're not quite sure what you're seeing and the ominous music is playing, and finally you get to the sniper and they cut out the music. It's dead silence except for the screams and the gunfire during the shooting.
But no, it's also the sniper's breath.
Yeah.
You hear him breathing and trying to calm himself down while the visual is what he's seeing through the scope. And it's so cool. It was like a video game almost, but what I love, what you said exactly what I loved about this movie's production value. More than once, they cut out music, they cut out ambient sound almost, and just, it's the noise of the moment. And it's wonderful. There's not too much dialogue when dialogue is not needed.
Right. And you know what it does? It makes this scene hit hard. You mentioned the tragedies, Arnie, and that really we have to talk about it. 2012, that was also the year of the Dark Knight Rises shooting. So this movie comes out with this scene at the very beginning. I'm not scared for my life or anything like that, but I'm really feeling it. They're very deliberate here in the way that they use sound, in the way they make you feel every gunshot. It's terrifying.
As we're looking through the sniper, there's all these people there, and it really does feel random, and he targets a little girl even for a moment, which again, right after Sandy Hook, so just unfortunate. But he moves away from that. He doesn't seem to be picking anybody out in this. We're going to find out later there was one specific target. But then when he does start shooting, we see a couple people fall, but we see this woman with the little girl in her arms running when the last shot is hit. And I'm left like, did he kill the little girl? Did we go there? Did they do that? No, they didn't. But it's ambiguous here at the beginning that it could leave you for a half an hour or more thinking the sniper did kill a kid.
Something that I think resonates throughout the entire movie, maybe you guys picked up on it, is they do not cheapen death in this movie, especially when it comes to the victims at the shooting. We will learn all about them in little scenes, just minor things, but they won't be ignored, as maybe they would be in another actioner. And we've seen a lot of action movies, and we've seen a lot of victims. These ones, they really want you to recognize the terror of what's happened. And I think that McQuarrie goes to great lengths to make sure that the victims are not forgotten in this film.
Yeah, I agree with that. This opening scene has haunted me. There are quite a few scenes over the years that I've been watching movies that just, no other word but haunting. And it comes back and it hit me hard. Like, gosh, all of this just to get one person to cover. Like, I have not forgotten the opening of this movie. And one of the reasons I went to the Jack Reacher novels was I thought it was incredibly clever of a plot device of how to cover up a murder. I know who you want to kill. It's horrible and horrific in my mind. But I was like, maybe these books have some other thing. And a lot of other books have some equally interesting ideas and plots and why things are happening. Tom Clancy used to be able to do the same thing in his books. Like, seemingly random or things happen, but they're not random at all, and there's reasons behind it. This is one of the two things that have stuck with me from this movie since I saw it, and every once in a while I still think about this scene, and if when I see shooters on news, I always think, well, was it completely random, or was one person that, like, I always think about this scene.
Right, it gets you thinking in conspiracies.
Exactly.
I am curious who wrote what, because when Tom Cruise got the rights to this, he did hire in 2005 Josh Olson to write this, and the only thing I've seen of his was that David Cronenberg film, A History of Violence, which I thought was very good, but I don't know him from anything else, and he probably have just come off A History of Violence when he would be hired for Jack Reacher. When they got McQuarrie was hired to direct and rewrite the script, but his is the only credited writer on this project. So however the Writers Guild arbitrated this, McQuarrie is listed as the sole screenwriter. It makes me wonder if anything was left over, or is it just because it's all based on the book that McQuarrie was able to say anything the previous guy did was just from the book anyway. But the change that is made here from the book that you called out, Brock, is major to me, because we see Jai Courtney shoot people, and then we see Joseph Sikora, who, we'll call him James Barr, get arrested. And we know this isn't the guy. So immediately there's a lot of sympathy going on and a lot of questions being asked, because there are these close-ups of this police detective Emerson getting shell casings and fingerprinting stuff and doing all of this, leading them to Barr's house. So how is it not this guy if Barr has the van? And if Barr is making bullets in his house, how is it not this guy?
Well, you've seen Minority Report. We've all seen Minority Report. It's the orgy of evidence. I mean, they go out of their way to show the coin going into the meter in the opening also, which is the key to the whole thing in the book. Jack figures the whole thing out because that coin thing pissed him off.
You know, I'm going to ding it real quick. Jai Courtney goes out there to commit these murders wearing sunglasses with a sniper rifle. That's not the way you do it. You could get unintended reflections.
Well, he's already picked a bad spot where the sun's in his eyes. He has to have the sunglasses because the sun's in his eyes. He's obviously not as adept as Barr is, because Barr knows exactly where you place the van. The same thing Jack Reacher is going to figure out.
He's a good shot, though.
It's also much farther away. It's like a much farther shot to take from where he was in the building versus the bridge, which is closer. And in the book, it's a much closer range too, not that it matters. But they made it look like he's really far away, and he's an exceptional shot to make those shots.
So you mentioned Joseph Sikora, Arnie, and at the time, yeah, I don't think any of us were pretty familiar with this actor. I know now that he's very big on that Power series. It's on Stars. But we meet him. He's immediately getting pressure from the cops. They want a confession because the DA behind him is going to make sure that he gets the chair.
Yeah, and the DA there is Alex Roden, who's an older gentleman, played by Richard Jenkins, who has been in everything. This guy's just a character actor.
One of the best.
We've reviewed him in the same year as this, Brock. We reviewed him in The Cabin in the Woods, where he was one of those two office workers watching all the shit go down and making bets about it. Yep. He's memorable in a lot of Farrelly Brothers films. I just know this guy from a ton of shit. And so instantly, I'm like, I believe this guy is a competent attorney and going to get this guy.
See, that's funny you should say that, because I thought he was here as a red herring, because he is that character actor guy. He also got an Academy Award nomination, finally, after all those years, hysterical in Step Brothers, right, with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly. But because of how he was playing the character here, I was thinking they were dangling him as a red herring the whole time. Like, you were going to think he was the guy, because they kept on saying, who's the inside guy? And clearly, they were making us go that way until we find out.
And Barr writes a note that says, get Jack Reacher. Again, I didn't remember anything about this. I'm thinking, old military buddy. I'm in a jam. Who am I going to call? Jack Reacher. I need Jack Reacher to help me out because I know I didn't do this. It's the exact opposite way. We're going to find out he wants Jack Reacher to come and kill him. And somewhere else in the country, Jack Reacher is just got finished doing the wild thing with somebody and sees Barr on the news. He's headed there not to help Barr, but to bury him.
And while he's headed there, we get the little discussion between the DA and the cops talking about who he is, the long, mysterious introduction of the Jack Reacher while he's on his way. Goes to the Goodwill to change his clothes.
This movie is economical with the montages up front, with the detective stuff, and then now again with Jack Reacher, all these character bits like the Goodwill stuff and the him going across the country and giving the data dump of who he is. The movie really, it's very economical and very smart in how it does and gets him there as quickly as possible to get the plot moving. So bravo for all of them to figuring out a way just to get to point A to point B as quickly as possible without it seeming so freaking obvious.
Yeah, because we're 10 minutes into the movie. All the players are on the board. I do have to ask, is Reacher, like, super sexy in the books? Do all the women want him in the books? Because here we do see Tom Cruise with some woman putting her top on, and then he goes to the Goodwill, and two ladies at Goodwill are flirting with him. Like, the checkout lady is making eyes with him, but then the woman behind the checkout lady, like, does a long stare at Reacher as he leaves. And then even, like, this middle-aged woman at Western Union does, like, the Groucho Marx eyebrow lift at Reacher. I'm like, is this guy just walking female Viagra? Every woman is ready to throw their panties across the room for him.
Like James Bond, right? Yes, I guess so. Women are drawn to this man because he is huge masculinity. Like, he's Mr. Masculine man. However, he's laconic and he's distant and he's very much like James Bond in that same way. Like, you only get to know him as much as he wants you to know. But physically speaking, yes, women do find him incredibly attractive.
And I just chalk it up to all the ladies want Tom Cruise.
There you go.
The handsome man walks into the Goodwill. That doesn't happen every day.
Megawatt smile. Yeah, why not, right?
So Reacher shows up, and there is legitimate humor here, which I think McQuarrie is pretty good at writing. I've seen it in several of the Mission Impossible films. The Usual Suspects is full of it. Here, it's like there's just this ironic moment of you don't find this guy unless he wants to be found. And then the secretary, there's a Jack Reacher here to see you.
Yeah, it's great. So we have to have a conversation now. In this scene when he was talking to Emerson and the DA and Rosamund Pike, it hit me for the first time. I know I've watched the TV show now. I'm reading the books now. But look, Tom Cruise is not a tall person. And he, in this scene with Emerson and Richard Jenkins and Rosamund Pike, everyone's the same height. Like, everyone's there. And so I'm sitting here watching the movie, and that scene comes on, and David Oyelowo has that line, weird meeting you, really funny line, right? And my wife's in the room at the moment, I'm watching it, she's like, wow, why is everyone so short in the scene? I'm like, it really hit me for the first time here. When we talk about the bar fight in a minute, it becomes completely apparent. I understand the man's short, you can't do anything about that. But when you notice it when he's not even in an action scene, because everyone around him is tiny or an inch taller than he is, it really takes you out of it a little bit, because the one thing that he is portraying in his line readings, in his persona, and everything else is, I am intimidating. I am a force to be reckoned with, but I'm not getting that off of him at all. He's saying all these cool lines about, and would sound amazing coming out of a bigger man or intimidating man. He is not intimidating in the least bit for me physically in this movie.
Oh, when Jenkins grabs his arm and Cruise turns around and is like, don't do that.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
No, I got serious off of him. I wouldn't mess with this guy. I think that this movie does a really good job of taking a guy who is of Tom Cruise's stature and making him underestimated throughout this whole film. And I'll say this right here. I don't think it would work the same if you took Alan Ritchson and all of his frame and put this into it, especially when we get to scenes like the bar fight. This movie wouldn't have worked if you put Alan Ritchson, somebody of his size, in there. Nobody is going to mess with him. People mess with Cruise because they don't see him coming.
I think Cruise's performance here works really well in that I think he comes off as tough without needing to be showy about it. And the comparative I had with this was Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. Mm-hmm. Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, he was jacked, don't get me wrong. And Patrick Swayze was a very fit, muscular man, but he didn't need to carry himself like that. He didn't need to give the knockout punch. He just needed to get you to stop attacking him. The whole be nice speech and all of that from Roadhouse.
Right.
That's what I was getting off of Tom Cruise here was steely, is confident. Is that no, he's not intimidating those people around him. He doesn't need to intimidate those people around him because he knows he could mess all of them up really easily. And so he doesn't have to flex it.
Okay, I'm understanding what you guys are saying. There's 5 guys at the bar because he's supposed to be big, right? Not just because they're trying to take down this little guy. But I'm getting a lot of the abilities of Jack Reacher here. I think Tom Cruise is really good in the detective aspects of things. And when Reacher is underestimated in the books and in the TV show, people don't expect this giant to be such a good critical thinker, right? Or have such a big heart. They think this guy is a meathead. And that's the difference. Here, it's different because you can see how smart he is, but you underestimate him in his physical abilities.
Right, it's the reverse. You underestimate him for being smart in the books. Here, he's being underestimated for being a guy who can beat ass.
Correct.
But we know he's tough because in the montage at the beginning, we get all of these scenes. It's almost like a Rambo movie of Tom Cruise getting dressed piece by piece. And we're getting all these shots of like the scarring on his back and on his chest and things. So we know he's seen some action here. The other thing I'll say is I think Tom Cruise does very well going up against Rosamund Pike as Helen, the defense attorney, as far as performance goes, because I completely forgot Rosamund Pike was in this movie, but I've liked her so much ever since Gone Girl. I completely forgot she started off as a Bond woman in Die Another Day.
Yeah.
And I forgot she was with The Rock in Doom when I was looking her up to see what we've reviewed her in.
That's okay.
We'll forgive that one, but Miranda Frost in Die Another Day, that's the first time I ever saw her. I'm like, who is this woman?
I'm pretty sure that's the first time anybody ever saw her in the States, at least.
I agree. It's like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Zorro. You're like, who is this person?
Right.
Yeah, right? It was like amazing. And yes, Gone Girl, she's incredible. And she's had an amazing career since Miranda Frost, for sure.
Oh my God, she's so good in I Care a Lot. Even though I didn't care a lot about that movie, she was great.
Yeah.
Saltburn, I mean, that movie just enthralled me anyway, but she was so great in it. But I'll always go to Gone Girl as just an amazing freaking performance and respect the hell out of her acting chops. And I'm so glad that for we'll call it the babe of the movie, they got somebody who could really act instead of just going, both Rosamund Pike and Denise Richards were Bond babes for the same Pierce Brosnan. So theoretically, you could have either one in this movie. I'm glad they went with a Rosamund Pike and not a Denise Richards.
Right, they went with an actress.
I agree with you. With Tom Cruise, Rosamund Pike, those scenes are fantastic. I'm not dogging his performance here. I enjoy what he's doing for the most part. What I'm saying is, when it comes to the physicality and those tough guy lines, I think Roadhouse is a great comparison, Arnie, because you never doubted Swayze for a moment. And here, I doubt Cruise. And that is in my original thoughts of the movie all those years ago. I had the same issue, is just that there's something off here. And the fight choreography is great. Jason, you said you couldn't make this film if the guy was bigger. I think the movie would be made differently if the guy was bigger. The movie is made the way it's made because of who the star is, right?
Right.
You never once think about Stallone's height in anything, and they call it out to great effect in Rocky IV, right? When the guy is so much bigger than he is, right? That's on purpose, right? But, you never have to worry about those kind of things in Stallone movies because they just film the movie that way because Stallone is that lead. And that's what they're doing here for Cruise. Yes, the ceilings would be higher if they had the guy from the TV show here. So I just wanted to bring it out here.
Let me try and put it this way. I think this word is overused, but elevated. This is an elevated action flick.
Yes, he puts elevation in his shoes. Yes, I know.
Yes.
What I mean is, you could stick Jason Statham in this role or Alan Ritchson in this role, and while you wouldn't have gotten McQuarrie, what you would have gotten was just a regular action director. And what we would have gotten is a regular action flick where Alan Ritchson goes around, he'll solve the case, and there will be a whole lot of fighting. And I think with McQuarrie here, we get a layered story. And with Cruise in the lead, we get a real actor. And Arnie, I'll back you up, and I'll back you up, Brock, on the scenes with Rosamund Pike. I think they're fantastic. If we're to keep going with the movie, the first time that they meet, they have a seat at this diner together and they have a back and forth about whether or not they believe Barr should go to the chair for this and what Cruise can bring to this investigation.
And he does give the backstory on Barr, which we do see acted out in flashbacks so that it's not just words, that Barr was a sniper in the Gulf War and shot, I think they said, like 250,000 rounds on the range and never got to shoot one person, and he really, really wanted to. So before he was sent home, he just went on a shooting spree and killed a bunch of people, and he would have gone to jail forever, except the victims were a bunch of rapists who just raped a bunch of Iraqi women. And so the government just is like, all right, this is all bad. We're just going to cover it up, and Barr goes home free.
And when I heard that, I just heard roll out. You know what I mean? That's Barr's backstory. That's fine. I think it's smart to keep less of the focus on Barr. It is a good idea to let the audience know that he's really no hero. So the whole movie, we're not thinking, oh, you got to get this innocent man out of jail. I feel so bad for him. I think that we don't need to be in love with Barr. We need to care more about the people that Jai Courtney killed. And that's when Reacher tells Helen that she needs to go visit the victims' families.
So Reacher does some investigating, and there's one clue that really gets in his craw. And he's going to talk with the police cop Emerson about it. And it's going to come up again at the climax of the film. Why did Barr pay for parking? Why did he put a quarter in the meter? And we're going to see in one of the flashbacks when Barr's being set up, somebody with gloves took Barr while Barr was passed out or asleep and put his thumb on the quarter so that there was a perfect fingerprint to frame Barr. But Reacher just can't get over. Why did he pay for parking? Why did he pay for parking? I don't know. Why did they? I mean, obviously they wanted the thumbprint, but that's not enough, I guess, for Reacher. He really, at the climax of this film, asks Emerson, why did he pay for parking? And I'm like, you never told me.
It's part of the orgy of evidence.
Yeah, so the reason Reacher was able to figure out Emerson was the bad guy and not the DA, not her father, was that no one would think about a sniper paying for parking. And therefore, why would you even check the parking meter unless you're going to frame somebody?
Oh, okay.
They did one too many pieces of evidence that would get the guy there.
It's not that he paid for the parking. It's that the cops fingerprinted every quarter in the meter and got that evidence. That's what tipped him off. Okay.
Right. There was plenty of other stuff there to get him to the scene. But why would you even think about checking the meter to see if you can get a thumbprint? Who would think of that? I wouldn't think of that, he says.
We're going to find out in this movie that Cruise is a good investigator, but these guys are a little bit sloppy.
Other than the quarter, there's a couple other things that Reacher puts up on, like the sniper hit every target he shot except for one, where we get this. It's a really cool shot of, like, I don't know if they had a drink stand or something, but it looks like one of those where you have the orange soda and the water and the lemonade, all the dispensers, and all the bullets go through that and make them shatter in very colorful ways. That was the only missed shot, and it happened to be right where the bullet wouldn't be damaged, like by hitting cement, and the police are able to get that one shot. And later we're going to be told, yeah, Barr should have gone to the bridge where there's no sun in his eyes, not the parking garage. He wouldn't even have needed to get out of the van if he went to the bridge. So there's a lot of intelligence in Jack Reacher that I didn't necessarily expect, because what I expected was a Mission Impossible clone, which is a lot of stunts, then some planning in between the stunts. And this is a lot more deduction, Sherlock Holmes type stuff than I expected.
And imagine if it was a mystery. Imagine if they didn't tell you in the beginning of the movie that this guy is being framed. And that's the book. And you get to go with this guy. He gets attacked by people left and right, but he's deducing all of these things in the books, and that's why I enjoy Jack Reacher books. But I'm not complaining here. I think the idea of taking that part out of it and just watching Jack figure things out, it completely works for the movie. I think it's a really good way to condense the book.
I'm going to go on a crazy limb, and this is pure speculation. Maybe that first draft was too much like the novel. And maybe they looked at it and said, we can do a little bit better if we tweak this. We put the shooter out front and then let the mystery unfold of the why.
Right. There's a lot of characters they cut out, too, because they're not needed when you do it this way. And they did a great job of taking all that out and get you the same story, but without tons of little subplots and tons of extra characters you're going to have to give screen time to explain why they're there.
I agree with you, Brock, that not knowing if Barr was guilty would help the mystery portion of this. But I think knowing that Barr is innocent helps us want to see Reacher save this guy. And Reacher's a reluctant hero in this. And so we are on Barr's side from the beginning, whereas Reacher has to come over there. Whereas I also think, as Reacher thinks, Helen is too much on Barr's side, and is she just doing this to get back at her dad, the DA? Is it, you didn't take me to the father-daughter dance, so I'm going to show you up in court. And he tells her, you need to humanize these victims. And I think this is actually a little bit rude to the families of the victims to make the lawyer for the shooter go to the families' houses and say, tell me about your dead loved one. But it's what Reacher demands if he's going to do the investigation for Helen.
It is a little rude to use that word, but it absolutely happens. And what I can compare this to is I spent a big chunk of my career, 15 years of my career, in TV news, where a tragedy would happen and somebody lost somebody. And on a couple occasions, I had to be the one that had to go down there and ask questions. You never want to do it. And I praise the movie for this scene between Helen and the father of a victim, where we really just see the result of this mass shooting, the result of this terror. And I think the purpose of doing these backstories, I think it strengthens our connection, the audience connection, by showing you the movie's not going to just forget about these victims.
I agree. It also makes the movie dark, like a darker tone. The opening scenes and then this scene here, this is going to sound terrible. I have no other way to say it. It kind of takes some of the fun out of the movie because it's so grounded in the reality of the situation. And you said TV news. There's an entire character in the book of a TV news reporter that asks these kinds of questions and then becomes an ally. And it's a huge portion of the book. And so cutting her out here makes sense for this movie, this version of it for sure. But I think they're trying to get a little bit of that into the movie here. I felt the guy who played the father in this scene was amazing.
Yeah, he was terrific.
What a great performance. And Rosamund Pike with him in that scene. Bravo to her. So yeah, but that man, woo. And it's a testament that we're talking about it. Like I'm talking how dark and sad it was. That's the actor who brought that 100%, made the most of his moment there. He was phenomenal.
This is also where we find out that the woman, his daughter who was killed, was a nanny, and she was killed, but the little girl we saw in the sniper scope who she was watching did survive. So this is where we can kind of breathe a sigh of relief that at least this 6-year-old girl wasn't shot and killed in all of this.
Right. And all this is happening, by the way. Cruz is doing his investigating and Helen's speaking to that father. There is a guy telling them, Linsky, who we'll learn is connected to the main bad guy. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I wasn't quite sure of the connection at first. I had to watch this movie a few times to put it together.
This is one I didn't have a problem with. I mean, obviously, Linsky, I don't know if his name is ever said in the movie. I got it off Wikipedia and the credits, IMDb, but he's some nefarious guy following Jack Reacher around, and then we're going to see him later on talking to Charlie, Jai Courtney, and saying, I took care of the problem for you. We're going to find out that Linsky set up the bar fight we're going to talk about. But, I mean, he's an underling of an underling of an underling with just enough freedom to screw himself over.
I think his purpose here is that he brings us to the big bad. That's what it is. And that's all there is to it. Like, he's the guy following him. It would be helpful to understand that he is the key for Jack Reacher to figure out that there's somebody up, either the DA or Emerson are the ones feeding the bad guys information, because this guy seems to be tailing Jack since he got there, right? So all of that could have been clearer. However, his role here is just to prove how bad the bad guys are and help us find that Jai Courtney's working with, he's the Darth Vader to the Emperor, basically. We've got to meet the Emperor. And he's our means to get there. That's all it is to it. That's all we need to know about this guy.
It would have been helpful if he showed up in this bar scene, because this is a big scene in the movie. This scene was in all the trailers. Jack Reacher goes to the bar, having a seat, just trying to have a minute alone, thinking about, and in walks Sandy.
Yeah, a 19-year-old actress playing this role. I was kind of wondering, how old is she? How old is she supposed to be? Too young for Jack Reacher, but probably around the right age for Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, there goes our guest spot with Leo on one of our shows. When I was reading the book, when I was listening to the book, I was picturing Julia Gardner from Ozark as this role. But here she looks younger, and she looks very young. And I kind of like that she was so young and Cruz was not. And it kind of played really creepy. I think it was great.
I love the way he just keeps trying to batter away with put-downs and one-liners, and the cheapest woman tends to be the one you pay for. I'm surprised he didn't call her the neighborhood bicycle. Everyone's had a ride.
When she asks him his name, one of the running jokes of this movie is he'll always give a alias that's a second baseman for I think the Yankees in various points in history. Like later on, it's going to be somebody from the 20s. Here he's saying he's Jimmy Reese. And so we're supposed to see her reaction to that. I do like the line, though, when Sandy is getting mad and calling over the guys to beat up Reacher. She goes, "I'm not a hooker." And Reacher goes, "No, a hooker would get the joke." She inferred hooker, but I meant slut.
By the way, Jimmy Reese hit 346 in 1930 for the Yanks, Brock.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew he was a Yankees player. Throughout this book, he does this. He did different second basemen and things like that. In other novels, he does like vice presidents or secretaries of the interior. It's a kind of a running gag with him. He always uses aliases and these obscure people no one really knows. And it's kind of fun that they call it back here with Duvall figuring it out later on in the movie.
So over walks Jeb and his crew. You recognize Jeb, Arnie?
He looked a little bit familiar to me, but I didn't look him up. Who is he?
He's William Stryker from Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh, okay. He wasn't that big of a role in those movies, but that explains why the face is like, I might have gone to high school with that guy. That was kind of the reaction I had when I saw him on screen.
Well, yeah, he put on a few more pounds of muscle for playing Stryker. Maybe he felt bad about getting his ass beat down here.
This fight, one thing I like, they called it out, is that Jack Reacher always gives people the chance to walk away before he beats them up. He's like, you don't have to do this. And again, there's just a lot of funny lines here. You know, you think all the time. He's very fast talking as they go out for this fight. And then the way he talks about it, it's going to be 3 against 1. The last 2 guys always run.
I love that.
Yeah, it's fun.
He doesn't have to knock out the guys. He's just going to disable them and be like, okay, now you can stop attacking me. But they don't. They just keep coming back, and he knocks them all down. I wouldn't call this necessarily a adrenaline picture, but this is a good fight, well choreographed, well filmed.
He's got a guy up and he's beating the hell out of the guy after he's already kicked him in the balls. And these 2 guys are looking at him like they want to come at him. And he's like, really? And then he throws another punch at this guy. He's like, look at what I'm doing. I'm like beating your dude.
I really enjoyed the scene. It's right out of the book. All the lines are right out of the book. But most importantly, it doesn't matter it's out of the book. It plays so well here. And the fight choreography completely works. Cruise more than handles himself against these guys. And here's the fun that a lot of this movie is missing. This scene has a lot of that fun. Later on, too, when he's in the house and there's a fight later on, there's also fun there, too. It just a lot of chances and movies take that are too silly and they go for jokes too many times. Here, there's in a movie that desperately needs a little bit of more humor or lighthearted moments that would feel weird, but how do you work it in this kind of scene where he's beating the crap out of people and just questioning, why do I have to keep doing this? That's humorous. That's the kind of humor this movie really could have used a little bit more of to get us to like this guy a little bit more as well. There's a big problem because the movie's so dark a lot of the times and what's going on is so thematically heavy. And the reason Jack Reacher is here and now he's trying to solve this thing with this woman, blah, blah, blah. It's challenging for me to get on his side. But in this scene, you want to get on his side. And there's whatever reason, the few times when these scenes kind of happen, you do want to root for him. But the movie doesn't keep that momentum. But let's give them a victory here. This is a great scene for the character, for Tom Cruise, and for the movie.
Emerson takes Reacher to jail, and nobody's going to press charges, so they have to let him go. He's picked up by Helen, and first of all, there's a great line in here that when he's talking to Helen. He's like, there's 3 things cop never does. They don't vote Democrat, they don't drive Cadillacs, and they never use personal vehicles.
And the cop looks at him.
That cop is Lee Child, author of the Jack Reacher novels.
I didn't know that was his cameo. Okay.
Yeah, he got a little cameo there, and he just kind of looks up at Jack Reacher and shrugs. I don't know if the shrug is, well, yeah, you're the guy they cast. You're not what I had in mind, but okay.
Oh, he should be so happy.
He was happy.
He should be happy. Cruise put this character in those books on the map.
On the bonus features that came out with the movie, he's highly complimentary and saying, nobody could actually be the fictitious character I wrote, so you have to do something different, and Tom Cruise is amazing, blah, blah, blah. But this is a cameo for Lee Child in this moment. I don't think he says a single word. He just gives Reacher his toothbrush, and they go.
And you mentioned that this scene, Brock, it adds some lightness, a little bit of comedy to the film. We're going to go right back into another very serious scene in which Reacher and Helen discuss the victims of the shooting. There's something in this scene that I'm not quite like. We go through each victim case by case. This is where we learn that there's one victim that's involved in the construction company, and we're eventually going to put that with the villain's plot. But Reacher concludes, he deduces that 2 of the victims might be having an affair. I thought it was a little too much. Or are they just trying to show that Reacher is that cynical?
I actually think it's showing Reacher is that smart and pays that much attention to detail. You know, I loved the TV show Monk. Just all the little things that Tony Shalhoub would pick up on. I also liked Murder, She Wrote, believe it or not. Not really my genre of old lady TV. I never watched Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, but Murder, She Wrote would suck me in with these kind of little investigative clues and things. And so the fact that a guy isn't going to buy his wife flowers on the way to work, very factual. Every time I've bought my wife flowers that weren't ordered ahead of time was on the way home. And a wife isn't going to worry about a credit card statement that's going to arrive after the anniversary. So if she said the anniversary was this weekend and she's trying to hide it, no, these two different characters acting suspiciously, hiding things from their spouse. Yeah, you could lead it to believe that those two were having an affair. That said, all the flashbacks we ever see are unreliable narrator flashbacks. We always see it from the point of view of whoever's envisioning it or telling it. So when Reacher is thinking they're having an affair, we're going to see a flashback of the two of them looking at each other and smiling and going to meet up in that square. We'll never know if they really were having an affair or not. It also doesn't matter at all.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all, but it's kind of a nice little thing. I agree with Arnie. I think it's because they want to show how smart he is. It does show that he can wrap his head around details, which is important for the character.
But let's talk about the actual target, because when Helen is going through her list of dead people, she gets to Olene Archer, who we're going to find out way too much about. Her husband started a contracting business and she supported him, but then came to resent the contracting business. And then he worked himself literally to death. He's found dead at his desk. She inherits the contracting business and then was going to sell it to Liebendauer Enterprises. Changes her mind at the last minute. She has an emotional attachment to her husband's business that she's always hated. And so the people who wanted to buy her business are now going to have her murdered because she's the literal only contractor in town and they can't just buy a different contracting company?
Yeah, it's thin.
It's thin in the movie. It's very thin. No question about it.
Is it better in the book?
Oh, yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's way too much to go into, and it doesn't matter. We're not here to talk about the book. We're talking about the movie. The movie itself, basically, they're killing her. What I got from it is she won't sell, or she won't give them a good deal. It's about a quarry. The materials will come out of the quarry. They want the stuff in the quarry. She's not willing to sell or give them a good deal, so they kill her, and they can get the quarry. That's how I took it to be in the movie, and it's extremely thin.
Yeah, because what they're going to say is that this Liebendauer Enterprises goes town to town when there's about to be big construction projects for the city. They then buy a local contractor. They, quote, build roads no one's going to drive on and needless things. And then they leave town with millions of dollars missing and scandal behind them. And they just do this like an evil David Banner, just going town to town and ripping off the city. And it seems like getting Courtney to murder the owner of this just so you can scam Pittsburgh out of some contractor dollars. I don't know how it helps you buy the business to kill the owner.
It seems overly complicated, and I think that when you're putting together this villain plot, when you're writing it, there's probably a healthy middle, because we've got this, and then we're going to have, what I'm going to say already, preview the next movie, a very simple plot that requires barely any investigation.
Yeah, I don't get all of what the bad guys were thinking, and I would like to have bad guys as smart as the good guys, and Jack Reacher is very smart, and maybe it's all in here, and I just need to watch this movie 4 or 5 more times and write down every detail. But if I don't think the bad guys are smart, I cannot argue when we are introduced to the bad guy being intimidating when it's Werner Herzog here, and this Linsky we talked about has to face off against him, and Herzog pulls off his gloves, and he literally has 1 finger left out of 10, and talks about how he gnawed off his own fingers to stop gangrene when frostbite set in when he was in Siberia, and Linsky can either chew the fingers off his left hand, or Courtney's gonna shoot and kill him, and I'd probably end up with that bullet too. I don't think I could literally chew my own fingers off.
I just don't know if I was going to chew any of my fingers off, I would probably start with my pinky, not my thumb. I would like to be able to hold things in the future if I have to lose fingers. This guy goes right for his thumb. What the hell, man? Go for the pinky. Break your teeth into that sort of thing. Work your way up to the thumb. What are you doing?
Yeah, you can live without a pinky. In case Werner Herzog changes his mind 3 fingers in, at least you still have like lobster claws going on.
You want to keep that middle finger and the thumb. That way you can hold things and flip people off. You got to think these things through.
I think maybe it's just the angle of where you're trying to bite. I'm trying to do it right now. Like getting the pinky, you got to turn your arm around.
Yeah.
You know, the thumb. Either way, I'll take the bullet. Me and Arnie can go down.
Here's one of my big flaws with the movie as well, and you guys are hitting on it too. We have this evil, one-eyed, no-fingered villain guy who really isn't necessary for the movie. You don't need this big bad. But to have this guy be this evil and this weird or this goofy, in the book, he's there too, and it's completely unnecessary in the book too. You don't need this guy as the big bad, this evil of a guy, this lived in, been through hell and back kind of guy. I don't think it worked in this movie for what the version of the story they're telling. It worked better in the book.
I think you absolutely need him here.
Why?
Because he's got personality, he's visually interesting, he's a good character. Imagine if our big bad was just Jai Courtney, who is... We've gotten some shit from some Aussies for not being nice to Jai Courtney in the past, and I'm going to continue getting that shit from Aussies, because I don't think he's that great here. They had to cut a lot of his lines because he just could not get rid of his accent during this filming, so he's not very talkative, but he's basically a blank slate who looks intimidating, glowers and pulls triggers, and if that was the owner of, I'm going to say it again, Liebendauer Enterprises, that would be really, really disappointing. And a film I'm going to reference again later on is Lethal Weapon. And I think that when Riggs and Murtaugh are investigating that, sure, you can have your Gary Busey as the lackey, that's the Courtney here, but you need to have somebody who's the mastermind behind the plot, who's orchestrating everything. So I think we have to have a big bad, and I think Werner Herzog just takes it to the mattresses with this performance. I love him in this.
I'm going to agree with you, Arnie, because Courtney in this, he's just a henchman. And look at him. He could never be more than the henchman in this movie.
Or any movie. I mean, let's face that Die Hard film.
Okay.
It only got worse for him from here. Die Hard and Terminator.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with you that you need a big bag and Jai Courtney is not the big bad. What I'm saying is you don't need this guy, this kind of over-the-top kind of Bond villain guy doing this plot. Yes, Werner Herzog is great here. Yes, his character is interesting and different. He just seems like he's from a different movie.
He does feel like a Bond villain. That's what I'll say. And this is not feeling like a Bond movie to me because we've only had one fight so far. You know, we're going to get a car chase, which is a Bond hallmark a little later on. But at this point, this is feeling more cerebral. And so to bring in Goldfinger or No Finger here is a bit out of the blue.
There you go. That's what I'm trying to say.
I got it, you guys. I think it's right in our faces. This scene in particular when we meet him, where Linsky is like, I don't want to see your face, but he knows who he is. And then later on at the end of the movie, when Helen gives a little speech about, you know, he's the thing under the bed, this is Kaiser Sose. This is the urban legend villain. And I think absolutely that McQuarrie was probably going for that because there are a lot of noir elements to this film. It doesn't play that way because we think of it as a Tom Cruise vehicle. But I see a lot of noir in here too.
And again, you may not need him, but if you can do this, definitely do this because it's really pulling me in a movie that's going to get more convoluted because we're going to find out that Linsky, to cover up his own mess with the bar fight, killed Jeb, who is the lead guy in the bar fight. And now we're going to have Jack investigating something that's personal to him, which is nice. Jack wants to know why are people out to get me and things. But it feels like Jack now is going on this A to B to C to D investigation where Sandy leads to Jeb's house and Jeb's house leads to these other guys, and these other guys then lead to Charlie and Vlad, and it's a lot of rigmarole for what I think is very little payoff to get Reacher to the bad guy who's involved in the other thing. You know, it's like if Charlie and Linsky had just left Reacher alone, Reacher never would have figured out it was them.
Right. They did this a lot to themselves. We already know who did it. It was Jai Courtney. We already met Herzog. But I'm still engaged because I'm still trying to figure out why this happened and how Reacher is going to navigate all these obstacles. And the first thing he does is go looking for Sandy. Instead, he runs into this chump Gary at the auto parts store. And Gary's got a punchable face. And I wish that Reacher had hit him. But Reacher confronts Sandy, ends up getting Jeb's car because nobody's seen Jeb.
Yeah, when he goes to see Sandy, he's asking Helen, what is the auto store in town? And I expected this to be like a product placement. It's AutoZone, right? I mean, that would be the place.
O'Reilly?
Yeah, exactly. Instead, it's default, which on the one hand, it's a pun. It's your default destination. But on the other hand, I don't want faulty auto parts. I don't want, the auto parts that are going to default on me.
And I think the movie recognizes that. That's why there's barely any cars in that parking lot. Nobody's going there because the name's so bad.
Sandy even hits on Reacher again at the end of this. She's like, at first she's scared he tracked her down, and then she pretty quickly comes around and says, I got paid $100 to start this fight, and it was all the result of Jeb, who's a meth dealer, and here's Jeb's car, and go to Jeb's house, and outside Jeb's house is Jeb's mom, who's like so strung out on meth, she's not even going to react to somebody coming up on the porch. But I guess that's an act, because when he leaves, she pulls out a cell phone to let people know he's there.
Yeah, she calls Jeb's guys. He's already being followed by Jai Courtney's guys. This bathroom fight, by the way, is great. It shows like the ineptness of these local thugs. They're just low-rent townies. They can't see past the end of a meth pipe. The one guy, they come in with an aluminum bat, by the way. Dude, use a wooden bat. And he ends up hitting the other guy. The guy falls down the stairs.
Yeah, if you get hit in the back of the head with a bat, wood or aluminum, you're not getting back up. I do like that Cruise does get hurt and does get blood on him, and he is playing disoriented for a bit here, and he's lucky these two guys are out of, like, Inspector Gadget, can't really figure out how to hurt somebody.
They literally hit each other more than they hit him.
Yeah, it's like a slapstick comedy, but my favorite part of the whole thing is when the kid comes with the gun and Jack contorts his hand so he hurts his finger, it's in the trigger, and he gets what he needs, all the information out of him, and he gets his car out of him and says, no, I'm not stealing your car, right? No, take it for as long as you want. All of that was great. That was so much fun. So that's what I'm talking about. Here's another fun scene of the movie that needs more of that. This was a really fun, even though it got a tiny bit slapsticky there, as you mentioned, it's a winning scene and a winning fun vignette.
Yeah, I think I've been a little harsh on this movie's plotting because I think that's its biggest flaw. And I've been calling it out that I feel like the Liebendauer Enterprises plot is convoluted and that now Jack Reacher, his investigation is just leading him to learn what we, the audience, already know. That's actually been the case since the very beginning of the film. But I can't say I'm not having fun with Cruise's performance. Yes, I mean, here, this is another action scene. I think this is only, fight number 2? But I'm also enjoying his gentle interrogation of Sandy. I'm enjoying his kind of laconic demeanor when dealing with Helen. I'm really just liking the vibe of the film, and I'm into watching it happen, even if I either know where it's going or will never know where it's going, one or the other in each case.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, Arnie, because we are 1 hour into the movie at this point, and we still have an hour to go. And at this point, we know who did it. We're starting to understand why, and we just want to see Reacher get whatever evidence that he needs to clear Barr. And it starts with him taking this car, the red and black Chevelle, this badass car.
Yeah, that's actually going to incriminate him a little bit because Charlie, the Jai Courtney character, is going to frame Reacher for murder. He's going to go see Sandy and say, oh, I just moved in around the way. And then Charlie's goon, Vlad, I don't think Vlad is ever said in the movie, but I, again, looked it in the credits. But Charlie and Vlad, they're going to kill Sandy, drop Sandy's body at Reacher's hotel. And so when Reacher drives that car back to his hotel, there's Emerson and a whole bunch of cops waiting for Reacher to arrest him for murder.
Now, how awesome was that moment when Emerson and Reacher look at each other? It was like an old-fashioned gunfight in a Western. Like, which one's going to blink first? What's going on here? Like, almost like in slow motion. Other movies would have done it in slow motion to make sure everyone understands. Or even like a Sergio Leone moment would have been like, you know, the close-up on the eyes, whatever. It really played beautifully. The two men looking at each other and then jumping into action. Loved that moment, and Christopher McQuarrie gets full props for making that happen. What a beautiful moment in this movie.
I agree. I was definitely thinking Sergio Leone with the close-ups, and it's basically a quick draw, only Tom Cruise is going for the gear shift, whereas Emerson's going for the gun. And then we get this car chase where Reacher is lucky enough to catch up to Charlie and Vlad, while Emerson and the cops are chasing Reacher. And you know what came to mind for me is episode 1 and the pod race, because I'm noticing here there's no score. It's all engine sounds.
Right, there is.
And you're hearing the revving, and you're hearing the squealing of the tires, and Lucas did that exact same thing with Ben Burt in the pod race of Phantom Menace, where the score doesn't come in until the very last lap of that race. And here, they're doing the same thing with a hell of a lot of great sound effect design to supplement the score. And the engines are almost as melodic and rhythmic as the music.
I thought the score in this movie is pretty minimal, and I think it works effectively that way. But yes, you're right, Arnie. This is a whip crack chase. I love this. Solid camera work all around.
Oh, not only that, too, but like the screeching of the tires, the gear shifting, the pedals, and no dialogue. There's not a word spoken for, 5 minutes? And they do this 2 or 3 times throughout this movie in the climax, too. There's no need for dialogue. We're not going to have any dialogue. And it's phenomenal how much storytelling is being told by just looks, editing, the cars. So I agree with Arnie. The centerpiece, like the Phantom Menace's pod race for sure. I got more of Drive, the beginning of Drive with Ryan Gosling. I didn't think the pod race, but yeah, it's showcase scene in the middle of the movie kind of thing, like the pod race for sure.
I was really just thinking about the sound design is what was making me think of the pod race. But here, I suppose Tom Cruise's Scientology bodyguards will hunt me down if I don't point out Cruise did all his own stunts here.
What?
All the stunt driving was done by Cruise himself.
No, are you kidding me? He doesn't do that. He has stunt guys for that, Arnie. What are you talking about?
And McQuarrie said, normally when you're doing a car chase, you have to figure out where to put the camera, so you hide the driver. And here, he had to figure out where to put the camera so he could show, yes, it's really Tom Cruise in that driver's seat. And the moment where the car stalls out was actually unscripted. The car literally stalled out on him. And so when you see Tom Cruise, panicking, Tom Cruise is thinking, oh man, I just wrecked the shot. The car stalled. We have to do this all over again. And McQuarrie's like, nah, that works. We're going to just leave that in.
Yeah, he didn't break character.
Yeah, but you know what I thought he was going to do? He was going to flood the engine. I'm like, come on, you can't keep doing that. You're going to flood that engine. Not going to be. And then all of a sudden it worked. I'm like, okay, I guess I was wrong.
I love the end of this chase. We got to talk about how he just kind of stops the car in the street, lets it run, gets out, goes stand in the crowd, the bus stop crowd. Very clever. Situational awareness. That is Reacher's best quality.
Let's not understate this moment. This is the other thing I've never forgotten about this movie. But he lets the car slowly roll down the street. He walks to the bus stop. Everyone there is in on what's going on. They're watching the car. And as their heads turn with the sirens, like in a tennis match, Jack just looks forward. And then the guy next to him looks at him for a second, takes off his hat and offers it casually to him, and he puts it on his head. Such a great moment, and I roared this time, and I was like, I love that. I always think of that scene when certain crowds and things, I'm like, in certain movies when they put hats on, I'm like, oh, it's like that scene in Jack Reacher. And that guy, again, no dialogue. The guy does everything with his face, and then he's on the bus with Cruise later on. Just a funny pat button moment on a fantastic car chase.
I also like that when the police show up, that guy who gave him the hat and another guy both step in front of Jack so that Jack's in the crowd and not just visible from the street. The fact that just every single person on that street corner is like, screw them cops, is just perfect.
It's a good way of keeping the audience on Reacher's side all the way through the movie. Or it's not like I left it, but it reminds us that everybody knows he's the hero here, and they don't trust the police.
So there you go. See, that's what I'm talking about. Moments like this, I want more of so I can be on his side. Because a lot of the time I'm having trouble figuring out, what is this movie telling me? Do I want to be on this guy's side or not? It's challenging for me because when they kill Sandy, it brings you right back into the harsh reality of how awfully cruel and how they disregard life, those villains do, right? Because the way they kill her is just brutal. They hit her in the head and then just suffocate her. What a horrible way to die at 19 years old. It's just terrible. And this movie does not shy away from that. So it's very challenging that the darkness of this movie is pervasive. So we do need something like these kinds of moments more to make it balance out the fun and the sadness of the situation.
So Reacher heads to Ohio to meet up with his Days of Thunder co-star Robert Duvall, who I think brings so much life into this movie. I'm not the world's biggest Robert Duvall fan, nothing against the man. I don't dislike him, but I feel like in this movie specifically, he brings a levity that no other character has. Like, he's just a funny guy.
And it's his presence. I think I know exactly what you're trying to say, Arnie. It's oxygen. It's a B12 shot right toward the end to wake you up again. And it enhances the credibility of the film to have an actor like Robert Duvall here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a paycheck role for Robert Duvall, and what he does with this role is exceptional. I completely agree that he is a breath of fresh air in this movie. The characterization he has here, the way he works with Cruise, the way Cruise works with him, the whole thing works. And thank goodness they got an actor of this caliber at this late moment in the movie, right? They needed this, and they needed this guy. So the right guy at the right moment, and thank God he's here.
So they do this silly thing, at least it seemed silly to me the first time I watched it, that if Reacher wants Cash to talk, Reacher needs to prove himself as a gunman. But what it really is, again, Reacher introduced himself as a baseball player, and Cash knows who Reacher really is. Saw him shoot a decade earlier, remembered him as an amazing shot, and to go, oh yeah, you really are that guy, takes him out to the gun range, makes him shoot 3 shots plus 1 warm-up shot. And this gives the information that Barr, when he came shooting, always came with a friend. And when we see the video, the friend is Jai Courtney.
So we know where Jai Courtney learned to shoot. We know his relationship to Barr. And we know that the frame job is very, very real. And Cruise has the evidence to prove it. I also love that this isn't going to be the last we're going to see of Robert Duvall. I think that's great, too. This is not just a little cameo part.
I agree. I thought it was just going to be this one little bit that he comes back in the climax is nice. We'll talk about if he does anything in that climax. But during this, he's also been calling Helen some, who's been talking with her father. And Reacher knows someone set him up and says only 3 people knew I was here. You, Emerson, and your father. Who has the most to lose if we clear Barr? And so that leads Helen to wonder, is my dad a criminal? And she realizes she pulled all this information on Lieben whatever, and now she's going to be a target. Will her father even help her? Or is he in on it and is going to hang her out to dry?
Did you think it was Richard Jenkins, or did you think it was the cop Emerson?
I thought it was Richard Jenkins. What can I say? I thought it was going to be the dad. He's a more well-known actor to me. He's a character actor. He's an old white guy. They often make villains old white guys. Look at Palpatine. So I thought it was going to be him.
They have an old white guy who actually is the villain later on, like Werner Herzog. But again, I mentioned earlier in the movie, yeah, he's here as the red herring, and exceptionally well. You really think it's going to be him, and especially with this scene, even though I know it's not him, because I read the book and I've seen the movie before, they make you really believe it's him. It's great. And then Emerson's turn in the elevator is, what a great shot. What a great performance. It's the reason we love this actor today. He's amazing in Selma. Just the guy's a great actor, and this is one of his first big movie roles, and gosh, doesn't he play it to the hilt? He's great.
Again, I figure he's on Werner Herzog's payroll, but his immediate turn to villainy, tasing Helen and taking her to the quarry, is sudden.
Yeah, it's sudden. They're trying to wrap the whole thing up quickly in a nice little bow to condense this ending as quickly as they can. I'm not going to go into it. It's not worth it. But because there are characters they cut out, this is the ending we're having here. She's the one who's kidnapped. The one thing that Duvall's character does come back to help them, like he does here, but there's a lot more going on at the climax here because there's like 4 other characters who aren't present right now because they're not in the movie. That's all.
And we're going to get a little bit more humor here when Reacher is on the phone with Charlie. And Charlie, this is the scene where the villain says, hey, I got your girl and you're going to do this. You come alone, you don't call the cops, that kind of thing. And Reacher's like, click, hangs up on him. And then he calls back. And then Reacher's like, I'm going to tell you how it's going to go when I'm goddamn good and ready. Something like that.
He does go to the quarry. Cash shows up. He won't give Reacher a gun. Here's a knife. Good luck. And I don't know who you hang around with, but I just met you. I'm not going to hand you a gun and let you go murder people. And so we get this big action climax. Can you explain to me, though, what Cash is doing? I know Reacher, Tom Cruise, the hero of the movie, is going to go down there and bludgeon Vlad to death and shoot other bad guys, but up in the rocks in a good sniper position is Cash, who he says he has bad night vision, but it's like he's shooting literally by ear. He's not even looking at the scope, and he's firing off some shots.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to take away that he is listening to where shots are coming from, where he hears Jai Courtney, and then he's able to turn and fire there. Yeah, he's got superhuman hearing when it comes to shooting. I don't know.
Except then, after those first few shots, he uses the scope like a normal human being. So I don't understand what he was doing with that.
My takeaway was he wasn't shooting people. He was running defense for Reacher because he refuses not only to let Reacher kill people, but he won't kill people either because he doesn't know these folks. He's just protecting his new friend. That's why I loved what he was doing here. Yeah, was it weird that he was not looking where he was shooting? Yeah, absolutely. But what really stood out to me more was the strength of this character of sticking by his morals, but still helping this person who he knows needs his help.
Right, he shoots the rifle that Jai Courtney is holding.
Right.
And that means that Jai Courtney's going to have to fight Jack Reacher. And I love this final face-off.
Or Jack Reacher could just shoot Jai Courtney in the knee or something. I said I was going to bring Lethal Weapon up again. This is a move out of a dumb 80s action film when Jack Reacher throws down his gun to, for no tactical reason, go hand to hand with Jai Courtney.
No tactical reason, but we know what Jai Courtney has done at the beginning of this film. We want to see him get all the payback from Jack Reacher. You know what's crazy about this scene, what I love, is Reacher comes down, Robert Duvall's firing, they take out the first couple of thugs, Jai Courtney has to go back to the office, get a couple more thugs, and then he goes back to the office again, and I almost feel bad for him. At that last part when he goes to the office, he's looking at Herzog, just look on his face. It's like Iceman going to his death in Days of Future Past. He's like, all right, my turn. And he walks out of the trailer, and the way Cruise brutalizes this guy, it's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, I get from a movie-going standpoint, we want to see Jack Reacher whip it out and say, mine's bigger than Jai Courtney's, and I can kick this Aussie's ass and have a fight. But this movie has acted smart with a main character who seems to be smart. So when a smart movie with a smart character does something this dumb, it's like putting a clown nose on Tom Cruise. I mean, it's that glaring to me. Whereas if I was watching a Jason Statham movie, I wouldn't blink at the scene. But because this movie has seemed better than that he throws down the gun and goes fisticuffs, just made me roll my eyes.
I completely agree.
For me, I feel it kind of upped the suspense factor leading into the final fight because it's a character you know can't lose. I actually switched my thinking over to Jai Courtney. Like, I felt bad for the guy a little bit.
Oh, okay. I had a different take on that. I honestly think this is what they call dumb movie logic. Because if you think about it just for a quick minute, Jai Courtney was able to kill Sandy without even blinking an eye. To frame Tom Cruise, he was able to kill all those people in the square in the beginning with the sniper rifle without even thinking about it. The man is talented with a gun and is ruthless as a killer. Then why didn't he just shoot Jack Reacher at some other point in this movie with a sniper rifle? So clearly we have to give it to the movie that even though Jack Reacher is smart and this villain guy seems to have, all the signs of this and that, no one thought of anything but let's just keep trying to beat up Jack Reacher. Why don't you just shoot Jack Reacher? It's kind of like the Dr. Evil, Scott Evil kind of thing. I just don't understand why there wasn't a scene with this guy using a sniper rifle on Jack Reacher, but then they tried to kill him with a gun, and if they try to do it again, then it would be too suspicious, so they have to go a different way. That scene's missing, because that is key, because they keep going after this guy with fists when all you need is a gun.
Do you like the fight, though?
Love the fight. It's Lethal Weapon. It is the Gary Busey in the rain fight at the end of Lethal Weapon, and they do it again in Lethal Weapon 2.
It's in the rain here, too.
Yeah, it's in the rain here, too. That's exactly what I'm talking about. In Lethal Weapon 2, they also had a callback to that kind of fight, too, but this one's in the rain. So we're going to call Lethal Weapon 1. And do I like the fight? Yes. Do I like the choreography? Yes. Do I like that they each hit each other so hard that they're, like, in pain, but they still get back up? In real life, like 2 hits and you're probably not going to get back up in real life, right? But here it's a movie, so they're seeing it down the middle. We understand these things are really painful, but we're still going to try to keep eating it up, which is why Lethal Weapon's fight's so effective. The editing here is better than the Richard Donner movie. You can actually understand what's going on. You can actually see all the hits land. There's too many jump cuts in that Lethal Weapon movie. However, I'm with Arnie, because at this point in the movie, I just want Jack, put this guy down, go find the big bad, save your girl, get out of there. That's it.
You know what I love? I love Emerson's in this trailer. He's holding Helen hostage, and you can hear Jai Courtney's screams outside.
Mm-hmm.
All you see, just right outside that door. It's fantastic. And then you think that there's going to be a confrontation between Reacher and Emerson, but no, he lets him know how he deduced that Emerson might be involved, how he deduced the motive behind the killing and who the killer was, and then he just swoops by the doorway and shoots Emerson, and that's it.
Emerson is hiding behind Helen. Jack comes around the corner, screams, "Who put the quarter in the meter?" Which was why I was wondering that question, but now Brock pointed out the answer to me. Reacher shoots, hits Emerson. The way this is edited, it confused me. I'm like, was it Cash with the sniper rifle? Because it seems like having a human shield makes it very hard for Reacher to make that shot, if not literally impossible for Reacher to make that shot. And so since we never get a good, like, POV in this, it felt really weird to me that he actually made the shot.
You're right. It is a very quick cut. You do see that he got shot in the head, but the way Emerson's dropping, he's dropping right behind Helen, right behind her hair, you know? All that leaves is the Zek.
We didn't bring it up, but it was revealed a little bit earlier, and it said here that the reason he is Zek Shelovek is he doesn't even know his own real name. That just is translation to prisoner human being.
It's the Zek. It's the Zek. So he's like the prisoner. And it's a deal. Again, I think in the movie I just watched, to have this kind of villain seems out of place to me. Although I do love how it resolves, that he tries to tell Reacher, look, you got no choice here. There's no other witnesses. Who's going to believe you? They're going to believe me. So Reacher just kills him. Because that makes the most sense. Finally, because I was just talking about that a minute ago. Why don't you just kill Jack Reacher? That'd make everything so much easier. And I know it's easier said than done. No, if you have a sniper rifle and you can kill people from across 700 yards, whatever, how long that is. If he's in their diner, just shoot him there, whatever he's doing. Then here, they've resolved the movie that way. Reacher's like, you're right, I'm just going to shoot you.
And he shoots him with Emerson's backup gun.
Right. So therefore, you could probably frame Emerson for it if you needed to. So Jack won't get blamed for it.
And he does it to protect Helen. Because not only should Zek get punished, and not only does Zek say, which one of us is going to prison, you or me, you killed all those people outside, and there's no evidence against me, but Helen has already said, these people know I have the records on them. If Zek gets out of there, he's not going to forgive and forget. So he's probably going to come after Helen. He may not ever be able to find Reacher. And so doing this protects Helen. And we never really talked about the chemistry between Helen and Jack. There was one scene earlier where Jack's in his hotel room and he tells her to leave, but she thinks he's trying to get her in bed, but he's giving her car key and shooing her out the door. I was really glad that after all the women swooning for Reacher in the opening, that Helen never, became a girlfriend type of role. It turned out they filmed that entire subplot, including them kissing and things, and in editing went, let's not do that in this case.
That was the right instinct.
I agree.
I agree completely. Yeah, you don't need it here. And in the book, of course, Jack sleeps with all the leading ladies in all the books. So yeah.
Does he really?
Yeah, he does. But there's that one scene, is this the same scene, Arnie, where they have Rosamund Pike in this halter top or something that it's so distracting. I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's upstaging herself. It's like so distracting. Every time she talks, it's like her bosom is heaving. Like, it's really strange that they went with that so far.
It does not go unnoticed, and that is the scene that you're talking about is a scene where I thought they might have a moment here.
Yeah, I'm glad they went against that instinct too, because sometimes when you cram in a love or a relationship plot when you don't need it, it just brings everything down. So good for them.
It would make a little bit more sense as to why he would be so protective of her here at the end, but I don't need it because he's been a decent, upstanding person, even coming around to help Barr when he has that bad history with Barr. So, yeah, I like this. And then, yeah, Reacher, he just leaves town, and Helen has a last conversation with Barr, who's ready to confess, even though he doesn't remember doing it.
Yeah, this guy must be really messed up to think that he might have done it. But it's good for us to get this resolution with Barr, so the guy gets a few lines and finds out that he's innocent.
Yeah, I agree with you. It resolves nicely. And also, don't forget, Arnie, we see how compassionate the man is when Sandy, the whole Sandy thing. So clearly they set Reacher up to be the kind of guy who will go to the mat for someone he just met if he finds that they're the right kind of people.
Even if not, I mean, in the very last scene of the movie, Jack Reacher is on a bus leaving town, and we just hear some guy roughing up a woman off camera, and Jack is not going to have that. He's going to go defend the maiden in distress.
I'm going to guess that the guy ends up with broken fingers. That's where I'm going to go.
So, Jason, Arnie, do you recommend Jack Reacher? Jason.
Well, I talked about Cruise so much in this review and why I think he's the right man for this role in this movie. A movie like this, however, you have to have the screenplay and the director. And I think, fortunately, McQuarrie, I think he is a great screenwriter. And I think he delivers one here that's sharp, focused, and layered. Now, it's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than we deserve in kind of a standard action movie. We know early on who pulled the trigger, but I feel like he does an excellent job of setting up a mystery. It has us looking for the why the whole time until just the right moment. Precision is the word I would use for that. And we're following the investigation because the motivations and the people behind them matter more than the reveal. Talked about Pittsburgh. Putting the movie in Pittsburgh rather than Indianapolis or somewhere in Indiana, huge difference maker. I love the city in the city. I feel the weight of the city. The story's grounded in the city. That's an authenticity that you can't get if you're shooting Georgia for Pennsylvania. And Cruise, I didn't come into the movie with preconceived ideas about the character from the books. That probably works in the film's favor for me. I think Cruise makes Jack Reacher human. Physicality is one thing, and definitely the Amazon series leans into that, but Cruise brings intelligence, intensity, emotional depth, morality. There's a moral code to the character. He makes you feel like Reacher is not just capable of violence, but he also has an inner monologue where he's constantly calculating whether or not he's justified in what he's doing. The script, I think it humanizes the characters, especially the ones that often get overlooked in movies like this, the victims. And even though only one of them is key to the villain's plan, the other ones aren't faceless, and I really appreciate that. I've talked about how I even feel for the minor characters like Sandy, the poor dude who can't bite his fingers off, and how I even felt bad for Jai Courtney because that's a one-way trip out of that trailer. It would have been super easy to turn these Reacher novels into formula actioners. Just throw like a Vin Diesel, any big guy in the lead, you crank out a string of, there's 20 books, 20 subpar thrillers. Jason Statham does those kind of movies, and I'm a fan of him, by the way. Jack Reacher feels different. This movie feels different because it's clearly made by people who know what they're doing. There's an expertise that you can feel from McQuarrie's direction, from the screenplay, and from Cruise. They trust each other. That creative partnership is so valuable. It's what makes this movie works. A star and a director that are true collaborators makes all the difference. So it is a recommend. I didn't demand a sequel to this movie, and we're not going to get McQuarrie back in the sequel, but what we got out of this, even if you guys, if the audiences didn't make this a huge hit, what it gave us, this collaboration, so key to Mission Impossible, taking that franchise to the next level. This is a recommend for me.
Arnie.
Going into Jack Reacher, both when I first saw it in 2020 and again for this rewatch, I expected another high-octane Tom Cruise action vehicle, Something in the Mission Impossible vein, full of wild stunts and explosive set pieces, loosely strung together by plot. That's why I picked it to replace Mission Impossible 8 on our schedule. I thought, it's the same thing. But it isn't. What this is something more restrained and surprisingly smarter. And I don't even think the Mission Impossible films are dumb. I mean, they're no Fast X. The Mission Impossible films have a lot going for them, but this has even more. I mean, I'd still file Jack Reacher under action in my personal video store, but I think this is more of a slow burn mystery than a full-on adrenaline ride. There's a few solid fight scenes and that one great car chase, and that perfect ending to that car chase, but most of the film is Jack playing detective and creating relationships with people and being a very solid person. And I think Cruise is excellent in the role. I haven't read the books. I don't even watch the Amazon series. I can't say if it's a faithful portrayal to the source material. I hear it's not. But for the movie they made, he's perfect. He brings that calm confidence and sharp intelligence to the part. Rosamund Pike, who's usually excellent, is great here too. I think her character doesn't get quite as much to do as I'd like, when she's sent to talk to the families while Jack does the real investigating, and then she's left just having repeated conversations with her father while Jack's having car chases and on the run. She's a real solid actress who could do more with this character. And I'd hoped she'd return for the sequel. She doesn't, but I hoped with Jack Reacher 2 she'd come back. I also still think they made a really good choice by cutting the scenes where Helen's a love interest. Not having that trope in this film is refreshing. Unfortunately, she does fall into the damsel in distress trope late in the game, but I think she brings real conviction and holds her own with Cruise. And then the supporting cast here is a standout. I mean, Werner Herzog, mostly a film director, being talked here as an actor. He's just memorably creepy in a smaller role. Robert Duvall brings warmth, grit, and humor to the back quarter of the film. Their presence keeps the film interesting as it goes on, when without them, it could get a bit stale. Then the look of the film, I talked early on about the city shots, the extreme close-ups of objects. There's also this one great shot of Pike and Cruise having an intense conversation, and we film Tom Cruise from the back so that you can see Pike's performance. But Cruise is also in a crystal clear reflection in the window, so you're getting 100% of Cruise's performance. That trick and the composition in the frame, all of it looks much better than I expected. And I'm sure cinematographer Caleb Deschanel deserves some shout-outs for that. I mean, he's been working on classics like The Right Stuff, The Natural. He was even a photographer on Apocalypse Now. This guy has a long career, 6 Oscar nominations, and it shows with Jack Reacher. If I have a criticism about Jack Reacher, it's that the mystery isn't as engaging as it could be. We're told in the first frames of the movie, Barr isn't the real shooter, and the motivation behind the crime, essentially a convoluted cover-up for a construction scam, is just way overcomplicated. And while this film doesn't aim to be a character study, I wouldn't have minded a little more growth or depth for Jack and Helen. They both end this movie pretty much the same as they entered the movie. We just had to enjoy watching them do what they do. And then, the final hand-to-hand fight feels like an 80s throwback that would work in a dumber film, but out of place here. But I'm nitpicking. Jack Reacher isn't trying to be a character drama. It's a lean, effective thriller, and it succeeds. I was fully engaged, and when I watched this the first time, I was glad to know there was a sequel waiting for me when the credits rolled. This is a strong recommend, and I think it's an underappreciated gem in the Cruise canon.
You guys are being much more generous to this movie than I can be. It's not because, I enjoy the Jack Reacher books. Yes, I am seeing this movie now that I am familiar with the character. But the compliments I have for this movie, which I've said throughout, the movie is so well made. Arnie mentioned a lot of the highlights of the filmmaking. That's all true. The performances are all here. This is definitely an elevated action movie. Jason earlier mentioned, there's a dozen 20 books, whatever you said. And if you remember, they did the Alex Cross movies with Morgan Freeman. They made 2 of those and they felt so disposable. And that's a really popular character. And he did not get his due in theaters. I know he's on Amazon now, and that's great. I'm really glad they're doing that. So as a movie, it's overall much better than I would expect from an action movie. It's smarter. It has a lot going for it. I never really thought Tom Cruise in the lead role worked for me, regardless of him being diminutive versus the character in the books. It's really something doesn't work for me in the way that Tom Cruise is saying these kinds of lines that I'm expecting a James Bond to say, honestly. However, this movie works the majority of the time. The pervasive darkness of it really gets me, and is the reason I do not return to this one very often. Not because of Tom Cruise's performance or the character, all that kind of stuff. It's because it's just not enough fun. There are definitely fun moments, but this movie really sticks it in you. It really makes you think about the tragedy of violence. And that's important to remember when we watch action movies and murder mysteries and all that kind of stuff. You have to remember, people die, and it's terrible. This movie reminds us of that nonstop. And I applaud the movie for that, but at the same time, it's hard to watch that over and over again, because sometimes you go to movies for different reasons, and when I go to a Tom Cruise actioner, I expect a different kind of entertainment. That's just me. I do think that there's a place for these kinds of movies, and I applaud the filmmakers for going there. I'm recommending the movie. There's no reason you shouldn't watch this. It's very, very well made and very well put together. You've heard my complaints throughout the thing here. I'm just not as high on it as the other 2 guys on the panel here. I think there's definite flaws, which we've talked all about this whole time. But honestly, you could do worse than watch this movie. It gets the job done and then some. So yeah, it's a green arrow for Jack Reacher.
I'm going to grab a word that you just mentioned, Brock, because as this movie hit in theaters in 2012, the audiences turned out. And I think that the streak that Cruise went on from this movie for the next 4 or 5, almost flawless. He went from Jack Reacher, which was a hit, to Oblivion, which is a very good science fiction film.
Good movie, yeah.
Edge of Tomorrow, which we've discussed and hopefully Now Playing can talk about someday. That would be fantastic. And then Rogue Nation before circling back to Jack Reacher. That's back to back to back to back. That's the old Tom Cruise that we know.
I'm going to completely disagree with you and say you're just objectively wrong. Jack Reacher was not a hit. In fact, it did so poorly in the United States that they thought we're done. I mean, it made $80 million in North America. When you look at Tom Cruise's box office overall, the majority are over 100. It's only the international grosses that made the studio decide to try this again. And then you talk about Oblivion. I haven't seen Oblivion. It's kind of off in Oblivion. It didn't make that much money. Edge of Tomorrow, notorious failure as far as box office goes. Yeah, global, it did great, but they had to rename the goddamn thing for video because nobody knew what the hell it was.
If they'd gone out with a different title, that picture would have made $500 million. Everybody knows that. Cruise has always had international bank. He is a huge international star. That is why he takes the Mission Impossible movies around the world, and that is why the studio gives him that full freight global marketing campaign for these movies, because they know that the money is coming from overseas. It's not domestic anymore. Dollars are dollars. If Jack Reacher turns in $218 million on a reported $60 million budget, you greenlight a sequel for that.
But yeah, I mean, I really think that the only thing that brought Tom Cruise back was Mission Impossible and then Top Gun Maverick. I mean, you look at American Made, I kind of enjoyed that film, but it wasn't huge. The Mummy killed a franchise. There's just so much he did post War of the Worlds that didn't land. And the Mission Impossible franchise, there's a reason he kept going back to that well, is because it was reliable.
Well, I think that that'd be the case with any actor. But look, we could talk about The Mummy, and I thought that maybe we would after we get through with Jack Reacher and never go back. American Made, I just kind of look at that as a small little comedy crime film. It wasn't going to hurt anybody, and it didn't have a huge budget, and it wasn't going to make a lot.
But we aren't done talking Tom Cruise or Jack Reacher. There is a second film, and we're going to be reviewing it this Friday, free for everyone, Friday's usually our patron show or our donation show, but our schedule's in a bit of disarray, and we just want to thank you listeners for sticking with Now Playing during this time when we're not covering the big releases the way we'd like to be, and we wish Stuart was better faster, primarily for his health and his feeling good, but also because we miss him. And we know you listeners miss him. But we're not going to ask him to come back a day before he's 100%. His well-being is our paramount concern. And so, in an abundance of caution, I think we're going to take off of our schedule, for now, July releases of Superman and Fantastic Four. We will review those movies in the future when Stuart is ready and able to participate in those reviews. But instead, we're going to review... well, we don't know what we're going to review. You're going to tell us what we're going to review. We have 3 weeks in July and don't know what to fill it with. We have some options. You're going to get to pick. But because we're not doing Superman, Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four that we currently had slated for July, we have 6 different 3-part movie series available for you to vote on in our poll. To go through them in alphabetical order, the first is what Brock was talking about a little while ago, the Alex Cross movies. Those include Morgan Freeman, Ashley Judd, Kiss the Girls, Along Came a Spider, and then they rebooted it with Alex Cross. Or, want to go a little bit more comic booky since we're not covering Superman and Fantastic Four? How about the comic book movie that was never a comic, Sam Raimi's Darkman? That includes the theatrical original starring Liam Neeson. Talk about him again in a moment. Darkman 2, The Return of Durant, because everybody needs more Larry Drake in their life. And Darkman 3, Die Darkman Die. Or it's baseball season this summer. We could kick back and relax and discuss some sports movies that we don't often do here at Now Playing with the Major League series. The one with Wesley Snipes, the one with Omar Epps as fake Wesley Snipes, and then the one where I think only Corbin Burnson returned and Scott Bakula went back to the minors. Or, before this trilogy of reviews, we are reviewing the Species films, a good companion to Species, Mimic, another 90s monster film, the first of which was directed by Guillermo del Toro, a director who's always interesting and worth talking about, even in a film that might not be his most auteur-driven. And then there were 2 sequels to Mimic. Or if you want more book-based mysteries, similar to Jack Reacher, how about the Robert Landon movies? We kinda gave Ron Howard a hard time with our review of Apollo 13 a few weeks ago. Does he deserve it? We have 3 Ron Howard, Tom Hanks team-up films here with The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and Inferno. So that could be our review. Or the final choice, we at Now Playing have a particular set of skills, and that level of skills is reviewing movies. We will find them, and we will recommend them. And will that be the Taken series starring Liam Neeson? You tell us. If you head to nowplayingpodcast.com, at the top of the page where you normally see our banner for our donation drive, you can see a banner to go to our poll and vote which trilogy we cover this July. The poll will be open for 2 weeks, and so we look forward to seeing what you tell us we're going to review. But again, thank you for listening to Now Playing during this time of schedule upheaval and moving things around and delaying certain reviews. We know that you're there for Stuart. All of your feedback and outpouring of support through social media has meant so much to all of us and to him. Thank you so much. We appreciate you listening, and hopefully we'll show that appreciation with this Friday's review, free for everyone, of Jack Reacher 2. Never Go Back.
Looking forward to talking about Jack Reacher Never Go Back when we come back to Now Playing. Thanks for the coffee, counselor.
Wait, that's it? It's just over?
You'll be alright, counselor.
No. What if I need you? How'll I find you?
Well, you don't need me. Not anymore.
Thank you for listening to this Now Playing podcast movie review.
You're very intense. You know that?
We hope you enjoyed the show.
Like I said, it's damn fine work.
Help us spread the word about this show by leaving a 5-star review on Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, or your podcast store of choice.
Your next move will tell me which side you're on.
Want more reviews like this one? In the archives section of NowPlayingPodcast.com, you'll find more than 1,000 in-depth movie reviews from our panel of hosts.
Listen to me, you prick.
On our site, you can hear reviews for every installment in the world's biggest film franchises, including the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars, Spider-Man, Batman, X-Men, James Bond, Middle-earth, Jurassic Park, Fast and Furious, and Transformers.
Why do I feel like you're enjoying this?
Plus, we have individual movie reviews, such as Titanic, E.T., Inception, Big Hero 6, Ready Player One, Pulp Fiction, Apocalypse Now, Doctor Strangelove, and hundreds more.
Remember, you wanted this.
And come back to NowPlayingPodcast.com next Tuesday for another all-new movie review podcast.
They're ready for you.
They'd like to think so.
Support from listeners like you keeps Now Playing Podcast on the air.
You help me out, I'll be in your debt.
You can donate directly by tapping the support button at NowPlayingPodcast.com.
I'll pay later.
You won't be able to.
And you can join our crowdfunding campaign for early access to new episodes, exclusive reviews, and bonus reviews available for a one-time contribution.
I can't afford you.
I'm not a hooker.
Oh, then I really can't afford you.
Need more Now Playing? Subscribe to our In Focus weekly newsletter for exclusive digital download giveaways, celebrity interviews, behind-the-scenes insights, and more. Sign up through the subscribe page on our website and get it delivered to your inbox every Friday.
Forest for the trees, detective. Forest for the trees.
You can also compare notes with us on Letterboxd. Go to letterboxd.com/nowplaying.
You never took any notes.
Oh, I don't need to.
And follow Now Playing on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our YouTube channel.
I don't like being followed.
Now Playing Podcast is produced by Arnie Carvalho.
You think?
All the time. You should try it.
Associate produced by Jason Latham.
One look at this guy and you know he'll do anything to survive.
Now Playing is edited by Heath, Santiago, and Arnie.
We got a way of doing things so they stay done. Clean.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual hosts and may not reflect the views of Venganza Media Incorporated.
How much of this do you honestly believe?
It doesn't matter how much I believe. It doesn't even matter how much I can prove. It only matters how much is true.
Venganza Media Incorporated is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by any entity that created the film analyzed herein.
I don't know why, that's just how it is.
All movie clips and music included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended.
If you were gonna kill me, you would have done it by now.
Now Playing Podcast is an exclusive trademark of and may not be used without the express written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated.
Where'd you get your law degree?
Now Playing is a Venganza Media production, copyright 2025, and no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without the written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.
You think I'm a hero? I am not a hero. I'm a drifter with nothing to lose.
This is like a power couple. I think Tom gets along better with McQuarrie better than he ever did with any of his wives.
And I'll say here that, oh my God.
I saw that joke coming like that. I saw him, he's setting himself up for it, and he hit it. All right, go for it. Sorry.
No, that one hit me after the fact. Oh my God.
I don't know about you guys, but I go to Goodwill and pick up women all the time. You know, that's just where they are. That's what you got to do.
Church and Goodwill. That's where you find the right ones.
Yeah, that's right. Libraries, that kind of thing.
I like it better when they have that like slight mildew smell. Like,
oh yeah, God. Totally. You know, put a bookmark in that, lady. I'll be right back.
A film I'm going to reference again later on is Lethal Weapon. And I think that when Mergs and Rigtaw, when Riggs and Murtaugh,
it's like Iceman going to his death in Days of Future Past. He's like, all right, my turn. And he walks out of the trailer.
We're talking about Tom Cruise. You say Iceman going to his death, and I'm like, yeah, Maverick. And then all of a sudden you say Days of Future Past. I'm like, what Val Kilmer movie is that?
Do you remember the scene in Days of Future Past at the very end?
Give me my wingman anytime. I had the same problem, Marty. I was like, what is he talking about? Iceman? What is going
No.